Hi, it's Andrew and welcome to another edition of the Performance Intelligence Podcast, the podcast about all things human performance. Optimize performance through adapting your physical, psychological, and emotional state. When you talk about Australian coaches, I think you get missed out a bit. Like, because they talk about Barassi or Wayne Bennett or the Percy Cerity, but your dominance over that period, you are, they often say arguably, I've got rid of the word arguably, you're one of Australia's best sports coaches. I want to acknowledge that, and I want to say thank you for the work you have done to coaching, full stop.
Thank you so much. I think it comes from a little bit of there's definitely a bit of a chip on the shoulder for me because I didn't make the Australian team as a player. But I didn't use it in a negative way. I think I used that in a very positive way and really leaned on our legends of our game, particularly Joyce Brown. But netball, you have to understand, is a very different beast to many other sports, obviously, in Australia. And we don't shout about our best enough. I say all the time, Joyce Brown is a triple world champion coach, which is also unprecedented. And also Marg Caldo, a triple world champion player. And then she also was assistant coach in the 2015 World Cup win. And I couldn't have done it without her, to be fair. We're so lucky in netball. We've got so many champions who would just I get goosebumps now thinking of it because we have a reunion this year and I really want Netball Australia and I want corporate Australia to hear me that I want all three teams together at the Diamonds Test match. Now, they're arguing about which day to go. I just want them all together because can you imagine the 1975, the 1995 and the 2015 World Cup winning teams all together?
Yeah, it's beautiful. And what just a litany of rock stars and legends of the game. Hey, two things on that. One, do you have trouble taking feedback without giving it to other people, without transferring? Can you sit in it and actually go, yeah, thank you, Andrew? Or are you, yeah, thank you, but?
Yes, most likely because of a lot of work I've done on self-awareness. I'm still a work in progress. And you're right, it is something, it's obviously in my background somewhere that, I was never good enough. So it's an interesting thing. My father used to call netball tiddlywinks. Poor Dad, he does cop it sometimes on these podcasts. I know he's...
Fair enough, Dad. Come on. It's the biggest participation sport in Australia. Come on, fire up, Dad.
He's very proud of me now, but in the early days, netball was a girls' sport and I was meant to be a boy. I was going to be called Daryl Bulldog Clark. So for those of you that know Australian rules football, Daryl Bulldog was the captain of the only St Kilda Football Club winning premiership in 1966.
They got close, didn't they?
I don't need to say any more, Andrew.
3 grand finals in 2 years. David Misson's a good mate of mine. He was the head of performance in those 3 grand finals because they had the repeat. So for any of our overseas listeners or viewers, because you can watch this on YouTube now as well, in the AFL grand final, if it's a draw, they don't play on, they come back the next week. So St Kilda, oh my God, that era, 3 grand finals in 2 years and they didn't win one.
I still feel for Nick and all those players, and of course Ross Lyon, who I do know as well. And, I have changed to Hawthorn. I've done the horrible thing when I had a marriage breakup. I changed teams in Victoria. Only Victorians get that.
Did your ex go for St Kilda? Is that the whole
No, he grew up around the corner from me, but he went for Hawthorn because he's a contra. He does different things. So he barracked for Hawthorn all the way through. But I barracked for Hawthorn in the finals because St Kilda was never there when I was growing up. So I had St Kilda and then Hawthorn was my team in finals. So when Mel and I got together 20 years ago, I just thought, that's it, I'm going to Hawthorn. I've had enough of St Kilda. I saw a lot of St Kilda background stuff when I was very young because my father was on the social committee. So I was steeped in St Kilda, and I still keep an eye on them.
And I said there's number 2. I've got to close the loop as well. I've got a theory. The best coaches were good, not great. If I think about a number of the coaches I have and that I do work in NRL, I look at rugby union, the work I've done across netball, there's often a similar theme. And the best players often don't have that self-awareness or that ability to unpack what they've done and teach someone else. There's a famous NRL player who's been involved in the club that I was at, and I won't mention his name, great guy. But someone will ask, how do you do that? And he said, just do this. And the players, they go, but like, I do not know what you do. And then he'll just sort of do it. Mark Waugh, shout out to Junior. I've mentioned this before, and Mark knows I've told this story. The best fielder or best slips catchman we've ever had. But coaching, he's got no idea. And he'll laugh himself, just relax and just watch the ball coming into your hands. So that's my theory.
That was the beauty of watching Mark and his brother.
Effortless.
They are quintessential Australians, in my view, who I just loved watching play cricket.
Steve could unpack, though. If you ask Steve about the technique, he'll tell you what he's doing in detail. Mark is just more with flow and feel. But my view, what do you think? That the best coaches,
I'm with
good,
you
not
on
great?
that. Yeah, definitely. It's actually, I think probably Dr. Cliff Mallett's he's done a lot of study in this area at University of Queensland, another mate of mine that in the academic world. And the serial winning coaches, often, most of them are not elite players. It's actually quite rare. Like the only ones I can think of really here, and there are a lot in netball, which is unusual. However, if you look at Joyce Brown, you would say she wasn't the best player in the team. She was captain, but if I talked to Marg Caldo, Marg would say Joyce wasn't the best. Marg Caldo was clearly an elite player who became an elite coach as well, but she didn't quite make it to the very top. But she was great as my assistant coach. Michelle Dendecker's the same. Absolutely brilliant player. But did she make it right to the top of senior coaching? No. But she got close, and we wouldn't have won in 2015 without having those two assisting me. And you've got to have the guts and the bravery and the intelligence to put people around you who are going to question you. If you don't do that, if you put yes people around you all the time, and this is a real issue in corporate Australia at the moment, in my view, just watching from the outside, particularly in politics, where we have people advising politicians, really, are they telling them the right stuff? I fear not in leadership terms. All of these things come together in Australia. I love our new Governor-General because I think, she's done the hard yards and she's, going to be a great leader for us in terms of our country. The other coaches I'm thinking of are Lee Matthews, of course, who
AFL legend.
Yeah, AFL legend. So many premierships as a player, and then being able to transfer that to coaching is quite unusual in AFL areas, because most of the good coaches in AFL are also, they would back pocket.
Good, not great. The other one that's a bit of an anomaly. There are some, but I think they're more the minority than the majority.
And the other one's Rick Charlesworth, who was pretty sensational.
Legend. Cricket, played for WA, played for Australia in hockey, coached hockey to gold medal.
Coached cricket, went to New Zealand, went to India. He's a man of the world. He writes his books with Shakespeare quotes. And, from my point of view, he's been a fantastic mentor at a distance from me. Like, I had his books very early because I knew Melbourne Phoenix, we had to go back to back, and I knew I had to look at what he did with the Hockey Roos, with the gold medals. So his way of operating really drove me in the early days, as did Joyce Brown as well.
I think another one just to round that out is Steve Kerr. won 5 championship rings with the Chicago Bulls. He's won 4 coaching. So he's got 9 NBA titles all up, but it's more an anomaly. So that theme of good player becomes a great coach. When you look back on it, or if I hold up a mirror and if I ask you 2 or 3 principles, key messages upon reflection that help that dominance, what are they? And you may not have known these at the time, so you've had time to reflect.
I think you said them in your introduction, actually. The number one for myself was to stay as grounded as possible and open to learning without getting silly about it. Like you can go down rabbit holes with lots of different things, but once you've got sort of a framework of really the areas the data you need or the people you need to read, I never just stuck to netball. I always went outside.
Well, can I just go already? Rick Charlesworth, Cliff Mallett. I have to ask you to connect off air with Cliff. He was a track and field coach when I was coming through as a runner.
He's still coaching now.
He is, yeah. He had Damien Marsh. I think that was his first national champion. Great track and field coach. But you got Rick Charlesworth. You're learning from Barassi and sports. There's a real thread.
And Wayne Bennett. Wayne Bennett was a big
legend.
Don't Die with the Music in Me. His book that Crawley wrote. I have got yellow marks all over that book.
Eddie Jones, you mentioned before we went on air.
Yes, Eddie, not quite as much in terms of a book, but Eddie he started his coaching career with Australia in 2003, I think it was, or earlier than that. So he was a sort of a contemporary of mine because I was up and coming at that same time, but I hadn't reached the international level. He did. And if he reflects on that, I'm sure he would tell you that he got there too soon in many respects, but you've got to take your opportunities when they come. That's the other thing, you know.
Lisa, we could do a podcast and go for 2 hours just with the legends of Australian sport you've learned from.
That was my hood. I had to reach out because if I stayed in, then I would go into the mouse wheel.
What drove that though? What when you look back, was there a crucible moment, or was it just something intuitively you knew?
I'd been doing it for ages. Like when I first started coaching way back in 1990 with underage state teams and also playing coach for Gippsland, I was doing everything. I was a complete generalist specialist. Is that what it is? Yeah. I did everything. And that's what I did at school as well. But I knew I got a lot of my learning from everywhere outside of school, outside of university, outside of education where I started my professional career. And one of the key things that I did was I was in the Queen Elizabeth Future Perspectives, it's a big long name, leadership forum back in 1990 something, just trying to think, 1991, where I met great young Australians in so many different fields. That was a watershed moment in my life that I haven't talked about before. You're getting this exclusively. And because I'm just going back through some stuff to help write a book. So that experience, that was fascinating. Absolutely. And that's why I've always reached out.
And can I just say, I love that you've now set in a public forum, Lisa Alexander, and I'm going to amplify the living daylights out of this, writing a book. Because when we first spoke a while back, we've got connections and we know lots of different people, and we spoke about a book. Are you okay for me to parlay what you originally said compared to what you're saying now?
Yeah, please.
Yeah? You're like, I know I've got a book inside me, but. And I said, Lisa Alexander, you're a freaking legend. How dare you? How dare you have the audacity to not own writing a book? So when I hear you say that, proud of you.
And Andrew, I have to say to you too, your call that came at the start of the year, and I know it's a patting the back situation, and I can hear my husband saying, oh, because he's been on to me for 20 years to write a book.
Yeah, but the closest to us we don't take the feedback from. It's
Oh,
always
we do. I can assure you. And Eddie's met Malcolm, my darling husband. He's got a doctorate in behaviour change, and I use he knows that I've been very much influenced by him, and I wouldn't have even gone for the Australian job actually without his encouragement.
Well, make sure you yell that out, Malcolm, if you're in the background.
I wouldn't have gone for the job, Mal.
That's dinner tonight and a beautiful glass of wine.
We're just having friends around for lunch soon, so yeah.
But yeah, so the book's alive.
Yeah, it's alive. I've got two ways of going. There's a netball specific type of story there. A lot of stories about a woman who gets pregnant at 18 and was first of all studying medicine, and then all of a sudden, shock horror, you wouldn't think so because I'd studied biology, chemistry and physics. I didn't know I was pregnant until 3 months into the pregnancy. And Carly is here now. She's a wonderful daughter to me, and, all of those things. But that rocked my world early.
18 years old, that's young, isn't it, to have a child, very young.
Yeah, and that's in 1982. So it wasn't as well, I definitely didn't have a lot of support at that age group. I was, and it was quite a big drama. But I ended up discontinuing my medical degree and went into teaching, which is actually what I always really wanted to do. So in some ways it was okay because I went off in my career of teaching and stayed very academic and, I did my double degree in human movement and mathematics as well, because maths was a big part of what I do. That I guess that just led me to having a big shock in your life, which changes things. So there's that leadership story of the woman. So it's a personal story around many things, teaching, netball, relationships, wanting to be the best at things. Like I was an A grade student and ducks of the school, but I wanted to continue that into my adult life as well. And because I had a baby, that didn't mean that should stop. I thank my mother for the support that she gave me. She's not with us anymore, but she's always there.
Yeah, beautiful. And when you go back and write and pull words together, a couple of different things happen. One is those dormant memories go, oh, wow, like positive. Sometimes it can be drawing on other emotions as well. Then you also come up with frameworks and models and understanding and reflection. And those watching this on YouTube, you are nodding profusely. So when you've gone back and looked at some of those memories and some of those patterns, what's popped up? What have you caught up with?
Well, it's that leadership forum, definitely. I'd forgotten about it. I mean, I did so much when I was young. And my daughter, even my middle daughter, said to me, Mum, how in the hell did you do all of that? Because you had me, you were writing a student textbook, you were head of the phys ed assessment board at the time. I was also teaching, and lecturing at my old university. Playing. I was a captain, playing captain for my club in Gippsland. Which
Lisa, I am tired just listening to that.
I know. It's just, I don't know how I did it. I must have.
How did you? And maybe a better question is not how you did it, because you did. What fueled that? What were you running to, or what were you running from?
I think it goes back to what you started with at the start of the conversation, which is always trying to impress my father. That must be very deep-seated in me. But there is also that achievement orientation that I think is very genetic. I'm starting to look back into my family's history now, and one side of the family is Scottish, and they were very brave, some of the things they did, and they were teachers, and they worked in the church as well. And, they made a great life here in Australia for themselves. They were free settlers. And, I think it's just in me, that working hard ethic that I have. And And obviously following, my mum and dad's lead, Dad worked very hard for himself in his own, he had a driving business himself, and mum was supporting that, and mum did lots of things, like she was on committee. She was a quiet achiever. She did her achievement very quietly. And yes, I still miss her today.
So if I follow the bouncing ball, there's a juxtaposition there.
Oh, and the other one is I always want to beat my brother and sister in everything, because I was
younger or older?
Youngest. I was a baby.
Okay, so a bit of case conceptualization, where you put together a mental model to try and understand somebody. You've got the competitive instincts with the siblings. That's driven many an athlete. You've got the dad who called it tiddlywinks, and you're like, no, screw you, Dad. This is what's the most participated sport in Australia. You've got a beautiful mum, gorgeous mum, and you light up when you reflect on your mum, who taught you can be calm and considered, and I'd assume very value-based, and get ahead. And then you have your world turned upside down, and it's like if a young man, woman now said they're going to have a child together or separately at 18, people would be like, oh, that's young. But back then there would have been a lot of stereotypes and social judgments. You're nodding profusely as well.
Yeah.
So that built this furnace inside you just to go a million miles an hour. But we can often over-index. And when you over-index, it can be fatigue, it can be burnout, it can be what Michael Gervais interviewed Michael this morning. So it's a day of rock stars. The day, can I just say, Wiz, we've had Michael Gervais this morning and Lisa Alexander today. Just an all-star cast. But did you over-index to the point that then you learned to self-correct, or did you burn out, blow up, and then have to put it all back together again?
Really good points, Sarah. I think I did another leadership course with the education department at the same time after that initial one where we went to University of Sydney, had a great time, blah, blah, blah. And then I did this other course basically put forward by Leadership Victoria, which is still in existence today. And it was a terrific course where we got to explore ourselves. Like, we did some really, silly things like, camping stuff and all the stuff that is considered to be esoteric, even today, really, because, I know people do retreats and everything else, but it really shone a light on ourselves. So I started that journey of self-reflection, probably in my early coaching career, which was a great thing. And that's why teaching and coaching for me, it worked beautifully together.
Anthony Seibold, Joe Schmidt, Steve Hansen, Clive Woodward.
Yeah.
There are so many coaches, Eddie Jones. In rugby union, it's almost a passage or a pathway. Be a good player, do a dip ed, win a World Cup.
Well, as you mentioned Ray McLean earlier, his son, Jesse McLean, who is a qualified electrician, decided he wanted to go into the family business. And one of the things Ray said to Jess is go and do a teaching degree, because that actually gives you many of the skills that you need to become a world-class facilitator in the business of leading teams. So many of our leading teams facilitators come from lots of different backgrounds, but a lot of them do agree that it is a great degree to have when you're moving on in the world and wanting to work with groups of people, because that's part of your skill set as a teacher, is how you develop that sense of observation, reading individuals, but also knowing what's best for the team as well, which I used to in my classrooms. Wesley kids, if they're listening to this, they know me, Miss A, and I would create a team in my classroom and where people belong. And I taught kids who had no confidence in maths at all. I taught them to be confident in mathematics.
I've learnt so much from Siebes, Anthony Seibold, and from Joe Schmidt, Siebes at Seagulls and Joe at the Wallabies. Both teachers, the way they educate and the way they teach people, it's been a masterclass. It really has been good.
I feel lucky. Joyce Brown was the same as well. She was a teacher, and I got to spend a whole year with her in 1994, following her around, watching her do her thing with Australia. That was the other experience I had, which I've just forgotten about and mentioned now. I got to see Liz Ellis debut for Australia in New Zealand. I got 5 hours of me and Joyce in a car driving down to Waikato from Auckland, and she didn't talk about netball. She talked about life. And I finally knew somebody else who was sort of like me. She had 4 children, and Colin, her husband, was a workaholic. So I said, Joyce, what did you do with the kids? She said, I had a nanny. And that was it.
Gee, our New Zealand audience is going to love your pronunciation there of Waikato, the beautiful enunciation of the Maori language. So if we just go back and close out that story, the bouncing ball, the drive from a young age, over-indexing, then learning about leadership, and then coming to this balance where you've gone, I've got a superpower, and it takes 20 years to become an overnight success. I love that book, Range, by David Epstein, that you have the collective sum of all the experiences that put you exactly where you need to be. But when you're in a role like that with the Diamonds for 10 years, you need a bunch of people around you who challenge you. In fact, Adam Grant says this beautifully. At a high level, which you are, and specifically when we talk about that 10-year period with the Diamonds, you need a blend of cheerleaders, yay, you're doing a great job, and challengers. Who were your key challengers?
I can think of those 2 people straight up who I'm really good mates with still today, and they're young. They were in their 20s.
Players?
No, on my staff. Laura Jouliffe, Dr. Laura Jouliffe, or Dr. Laura Piramelli, and Dr. Mitch Mooney, because they both had their doctorates when they came into our team. One was the performance analyst, Dr. Mitch Mooney. The other, Laura, was our exercise physiologist, but I can see you said cheerleader, and I immediately went to Laura. But also Angie Bain as well, my wellbeing manager. She was, and that's a separate issue. But I'll talk about the 2 youngsters first of all, because they were at the AIS, because you never get the experienced staff in the sports that don't get the most money, because we don't. But it doesn't matter. Those 2 were brilliant. And they were with me the whole way through. And I went to both. Well, I didn't go to Mitch's wedding, but I went to Laura's. They both had children now. I watched them grow up in front of me, but I got the opportunity also to mentor them in leadership and life. I'm very grateful for that. My husband, Malcolm, helped me with that, with this group. We did work on the Covey principles, Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which Malcolm also used when he was a principal in school. And I think I started it back in the early 90s as well, where first things are first. And the work on yourself is the most important thing, and it has to continue.
And interesting as you say that.
Even when you're a grandpa or a grandma or a great-grandpa or a great-grandma, that ability to be self-aware just really helps in times that are tough. And when you're dealing with your own family, it gets very emotional. But, we miss Malcolm's dad today, because he would say things like, take it slowly. And he would remind about that.
Covey's book, which is decades old, now in sports psych or performance psych, it's really just saying the same things, but this is after decades more research. He was so far ahead of his time, Covey, because we talk about self-awareness. Before you regulate behaviours, you've got to actually know where you are. So you obviously had this real awareness back then to have a blend of people like Laura and Mitch and cheerleaders and challengers. And I said this at the start as well. I'm really curious on the answer on this question. If you look back, is there 1 or 2 coaches, 1 or 2 people that really influenced you as a young woman?
As a young woman, golly, there's just been so many. I had so many I was very lucky. I explained this to Malcolm as well. I've had so many good bosses in education who actually allowed me to grow and allowed me to do things in sport at the same time as teaching, because they could see the great advantage of that. So I want to mention them, because all of them in some way, shape or form helped to shape the leader I am today. And they were men. But of course I had Joyce Brown and all the coaches I had through my time in netball would show me different things that were important. Norma Plummer would show me the quality of training. Joyce Brown would show me you have to know the person first, and then the rest comes after that. And then I also learnt from the players I coached, because I was coaching at a very young age. So I coached Victoria to a national title in 1995. When I had Simone McInnes as the captain, I'd played with Simone. So those relationships all assisted me to become a more holistic coach in so many respects. From an emotional intelligence point of view, I had the academic side. That was no problem. I can recite stuff. I can do that stuff. It was the communication and relationship side that put me at the forefront of my sport. And I was doing team culture work before it became sexy.
Well, I do want to talk about Ray in a moment, but you got Norma, Joyce. You said a couple of men who really influenced you as well. Who were they?
Oh, well, Ray did as well, Ray McLean, because I followed Ray's work with St Kilda from a very early time.
That's where you first came into contact following.
Yeah. And there's obviously some St Kilda players that work for leading teams now. And, they know I know what they were like back then in the background. And I love Stan Alves as well. His coaching of St Kilda was terrific. But I was going to say, I think it was people like Vic Rowlands, who was my first boss at Leongatha Secondary College, who was an art teacher, but a great, he could spot talent and he knew how to develop it. And he knew what to say at the right time. So I learnt a lot from him. Actually, I just read a letter he sent me when I got the job as the Australian coach. He sent me a card.
It says a lot about him as a person.
Yeah. The other one's Bill Sweetnam, who's a great mate of mine, and he's always had my back. So when I had some trouble with politics during the time of Diamonds, I just went to Bill, and I would go to Malcolm as well, of course, my husband. But Bill had that experience in Australian sport that you just can't, you can't.
So for anyone not sure, absolute legend of swimming. Well, what's becoming really apparent, whether this was through design or default, but you've had this beautiful cross-pollination from people in different sports that you could go to with humility. And I imagine you went there like with your personality, but that humbleness. And, hey, champ, this is what I'm struggling with. Can you help me? And all these people have helped weave these beautiful tapestries, like a Pakari rug with a bit of red here, a bit of purple there, a bit of green, with your own personal philosophy. And there's one thing you just said before that if I listen back to this and don't ask this question, I'll be livid with myself, Lisa. I do a lot of work like you do with corporates and leadership. Evolving leadership is a big topic.
Yes.
What's your advice to coaching or leading people at a similar age to you? Because underneath that, for so many people listening or watching this, is imposter syndrome. So you were coaching the Victorian netball team, which was back then it was New South Wales and Victoria, were the powerhouse for the Australian team.
Yes.
And you're coaching
like Australia and New Zealand in netball as well. It was, yeah.
Yeah. But you're coaching people not only your same age but teammates. So there's two things going on there. People you've worked with and you're suddenly elevated to lead, and then people you're leading at a similar age. How did you get around that? How did you work through that?
My teaching skill. This is where teaching helps leaders so much. When you learn how to teach and coach, the basics of it, the communication, the closing the loop like you're talking about now, just being honest with people to help and to be at the spot that they're at, which actually was on our coaching little WhatsApp group today. Vern Gambetta, who's a famous coach in America, he put the question. He said, do you teach from technique or to technique? He wanted, and he called it, you know what he called it? Brain gym for us, which is true. And I think Eddie got on there and he went, from to something. And I had to, of course, do my thing, which was, I think what I did at a very young age when I started coaching as well was I was also educating coaches. So I was doing education courses back then for Netball Victoria, like running level 2s. And so I had both happening. I was coaching myself in practice, plus I was leading and mentoring and teaching coaches as well, because they were hungry for it. I had the skills to do that. So that was always a part of my whole kit bag as a coach, right from the beginning. And therefore, it was, again, I'd say, and Malcolm hates hearing this, that I was a natural at it, because we both believe that you can develop skill and you can change. That's a very big tenet from both of us as teachers. And so we always think that you can work on that. So giving feedback, learning how to do that, learning to be true to your word, be consistent, and let people know where they're at so they're not working in a vacuum. That is one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give leaders today. Even at my age of 61, knowing that I need to reach out and be consistent with my practice, especially with the coaches that I'm mentoring at the moment, the young coaches, it's about consistency. And it's the same as an athlete, to be fair. That consistent work has to be done.
Two immediate thoughts. Number one is a mutual buddy of ours, Craig Harper. G'day, Harps. Legend.
Oh, of course. I forgot about Craig.
And Harps again, mate, fuck 61, champ. You still got decades left in the tank. Like, so I love Harps. I love his laconic Aussie F-bomb dropping, but there's a massive intellect and a beautiful caring. But Harps would say, golly, 61, you're just getting started. And you are, because you're entering the corporate world now and just starting all over. But the second thing I was going to say on that.
And can I tell you, he would tell you also that he worked for me for 10 cents an hour.
You were one of the first teams, weren't you, that he worked for?
Yes, he had my strength. He did my strength and conditioning for Melbourne Phoenix, our back-to-back premierships, or 3 grand finals in a row. Yeah,
I'll make sure Harps listens to this. The second thing I was thinking about, it's really, really interesting. We're 30 plus minutes into a conversation. One of Australia's best ever coaches. We haven't spoken about the athletes. We will. But what I find interesting on that, here's my observation. Tell me whether I've got this right or whether I'm just totally up the wrong track. What made you successful is a focus on team first, individual second. You're very clear on first principles.
Can I just change that a little bit with the team first? It was actually knowing the person first, then the athlete second. I definitely would have worked on team and individual both at the same time, because as great teachers know, you can't teach a class. You teach individuals in a class setting. So you must be able to juxtapose both and mix it.
The dance, yeah. But sometimes I talk to a coach and it's very much diving in. The athletes, we did this. With you, there was this a real conscious setting up the environment, the culture, the values, the frameworks, and the individual. That's a huge lesson for our audience.
It is, because if you focus too much on individuals and you then become friends with them as well, it's a great danger for young coaches, young leaders in every sphere of life, because you then you're there. At the end of the day, a coach should do no harm. And I say this seriously, no harm physically, emotionally, spiritually, because you are in a position of power. You have to understand your power you have. And it is vital that people understand that. And in teaching, it's very clear, because we are very clear about that. There is a line in the sand. And I remember a softball coach saying on a podcast once, she had been a great athlete in one of the colleges and then went into coaching. And she said the very first thing she had to do was learn not to socialise with her crew, because when you do that, you're in danger.
The 2005 AFL Premiership winning coach, the great man Paul Roos, did very similar from you, stepped from playing at an elite level and went into coaching. Didn't have the gap. They often talk about the 10-year gap. Roosy went in after a couple of years. And when he addressed the squad, a lot of the senior players were his mates. And he said very clearly, I'm here to be respected, not liked. So he understood how important it was to get that balance between respect. I'm going to make some decisions that are going to piss some of you off. I'm going to drop some of you. I'm going to promote some of you. I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to be respected. That is such an important lesson. I still think I struggle with that at times in my leadership and my development.
And we're people pleasers at the end of the day. We want to work in groups. We're social humans, and it is very difficult to be an outlier and on your own. There is a part of me that likes being on my own. That's another thing. You have to want to be the leader and put yourself forward, because there has to be a bit of ego in it. Otherwise, you don't belong there. Leading, you've got a huge responsibility and you've got to perform as a performer. So you need ego to help you perform. But you've just got to mind that it doesn't get ahead of the playing group, because the playing group at the end of the day will do you over if they see the coach getting into too much power and too much ego.
Beautiful segue from belonging into developing a team identity. So talk to me about Sisters in Arms. First of all, the evolution or the need for that, and then what it was.
Yeah, look, it was a very interesting time in sport in Australia at that time. I came in at a time when I'd been watching a lot of rugby union. My husband played rugby union for Melbourne University of Melbourne, and he introduced me to the game. I hardly knew it because I'm from Victoria, and I just fell in love with it straight away. I went and saw a test match. He took me to Twickenham, and that was it.
Oh, can I just say, how good is Twickenham? My first one was there, the spring tour last year. 80,000 fans, and we won. Wallabies won in the 84th minute with Maxi Jorgensen down the left-hand side. And
it was wonderful. I remember it.
And the crowd stopped swing low.
Oh, yes.
We'll get some B-roll audio in with it. And then it was just a pin drop. Amazing.
Yeah, it was an amazing game. We watched, I think we might have been in Portugal or somewhere. We watched it. We were in Europe. And I went to that test match and I fell in love with rugby. And also the whole idea of, this is a sport where you really fair incomely get to represent your country. Like rugby league, yes, okay. Yes, it is. Look, it is to an extent, but not. Australian rules football, definitely not. That's just pretending.
Oh, come on. They have the Irish challenge.
It is pretending. They know that, and they know that's their weakness as well. So they shouldn't try and make things up. They should just stick to their strengths, and I think they should have a State of Origin series. So there you go. Laura Kane will listen to this podcast, I know. Laura, stick to your guns. Just go with State of Origin. Okay. So I was very observant of what's happening, especially in cricket as well. I watch a lot of cricket. I'm pretty good mates with Justin Langer, and I think he was coaching Western Australia at the time, and he had very similar views to me about the way people should be behaving when they're representing their country. And I watched the Wallabies and I just saw entitlement. And I remember watching James Horwell in the warm-up against the British Lions in Sydney. Mel and I flew up there. We paid money. We went and we got the tickets. And I watched him get injured in that warm-up because I can observe these things. And I thought to myself, that person is not putting the team first. He should have pulled out. And the rest is history, because Robbie Deans then obviously, took the fall and all of those things. So those great lessons from rugby actually really drove what I was going to work with the Diamonds. They were starting to do stuff like kangaroo court. No, I'm not having drinking games at the end of test matches. It is not the environment that I want for the netballers. We are not following the rugby union players. No way. So that change had to happen. And it was Julie Fitzgerald who suggested it first. She said, why don't you get Ray McLean in? Because of, the Bloods culture is fantastic with Sydney Swans, and it is. And I love what they've done.
So for anyone who doesn't know that, the Bloods goes back to the Docklands in Melbourne. And when they merged and came up to Sydney, they became known as the Blood-Stained Angels, which goes way back to the working days. So the Sydney Swans carved an identity, not just an identity in Sydney, but also back to the origins and the roots. And it was very, very important part of carving out that identity as the Bloods.
Yeah, and, I know Eddie Jones knows this too when he went to England and when he went to Japan as an international coach coming into a different country. You really have to respect and understand the culture of the country to really grab the hearts and the minds of those athletes. And it's not easy to do when you're from another country, because you don't share the same background, DNA and all of that stuff. Some coaches can do it, but it is very hard. And a lot of coaches do not even go there. They still stick with the X's and O's and don't do the culture piece. So I knew I had to do it with the Diamonds because I could feel the entitlement creeping in just a tiny bit because we were still not being paid a lot. But the players were just starting to, push the individualism side of things instead of team first.
Which happens when you're winning and dominant. It's easy to drink the Kool-Aid. Everyone would be telling them in the local street, the coffee shop, especially around netball circles, you're amazing. And you can start to believe that.
And, we were just starting to get more media coverage than we've ever had before. And so there had to be a balance. And I knew we had to sell our sport. That was the other thing that I was told. And I was quite happy to do that myself and not have the players, not that I didn't want them to be household names, I did. But I thought they had so much on their plates. And that was the biggest thing they told me. I went to all of them and asked them and it was a question that Bill Sweetenham gave to me. What 3 things do you need from me and the program to win gold in Glasgow?
Oh, what a great question.
And it was. And it developed our whole program because that's when we heard clearly we need well-being because everyone was out of balance. Oh, I'm too busy doing this. And Australia was getting lost. And here you've got a coach who would have walked over broken glass to play for my country, hearing people didn't want to go to camps. And that had to go. So that's when we started, and it was beautiful. It took a while. Monia Gerard, Nat Von Berto, even Kath, because Kath's quite individual, but she does get team at the end of the day. They all helped drive this because they had to be honest themselves, the 3 of them, because they were part of the old crew. And they had to say, no, we need to do things differently. We need to not have spots on the bus. We need to bring young players in and make them feel really good so that they could shine. And that's what it was all about.
And what was the trademark? Because I know Ray's very big on coming up with a trademark or a reference of behaviours. Did you have a trademark that you can share with us?
It took us a while. Laura Geitz came up with it, which was quite fortuitous because she became the captain in any case after our leadership vote, which is a controversy in itself. But Laura came up with the emotional connection, which is what Ray always wanted, which was sisters in arms. We've got our arms around each other as we're on the side of the court. All of us cry nearly. I cry every time. Every 102 tests I sang it, I was crying. And it immediately brings that emotional connection to what you're doing. You're out there representing bloody Australia,
Which millions of young boys and girls play.
No one can give you money for that. You do it because it is one of the greatest achievements that you can have in your sport. And together that power and that emotion, that is what drives performance.
So you think they'd lost that, though? They were getting a little bit ahead of themselves, taking it for granted, and that beautiful
Just a
connection?
little bit. I just didn't want it to happen because I knew we were coming into the professional era, and I knew I could hear Joyce ringing in my ears, Lisa, we're always being professionals. They're just getting a bit more money now. And money can lead to mediocrity because it leads to comfort. People understand, the billionaires in the world, they know what I'm talking about. They don't even know probably how much money they have. They do it because they love doing what they're doing. They happen to have a lot of money, and some of the really great ones give it away, all of it.
I had a really interesting conversation with a player. I won't even mention which sport. This was yesterday. He's just been offered a life-changing opportunity. And 25 minutes into the conversation, it was very much about him, and I pattern interrupted, and I was pretty blunt with him. I used the appropriate language. And so when I first met you, all you wanted to do was to represent and insert a few teams. Where's that guy gone?
Yep.
And I just paused.
Where's he gone?
And you know what he said to me? He said, "Oh, fuck, Maisie. You just slapped me across the face, mate." Purposely, I did. And then we had a really different conversation. And I said, "Look, I'm neutral. Think of me as Switzerland. But here's what I do know, having been involved in elite sport for 20 plus years. When you start to make decisions on money rather than passion and purpose, bad shit happens." Because money can excite you for a year and the bank balance looks good, but you're a long time retired.
Exactly. And look, I'm thinking of Warren Buffett now as well. When he gives investment advice, he says to people, don't do it because of the tax break. You do it because it's a great company and it's going to make money and it's a business. Okay. I follow Warren Buffett's philosophy, in terms of he doesn't smash his wealth around everywhere. He just lives his life. Yes, he's unique, he's quirky, all those things. But at the end of the day, he has great lessons for all of us about not getting too greedy, don't get too far ahead of yourself, and be calm when the markets are this is an opportunity to, buy some really good companies when they're low.
And buy the value meals at McDonald's. He's worth billions of dollars. He still buys the cheap meals at McDonald's, even though he's worth billions of dollars.
Yes, he does, but I wouldn't be eating McDonald's. Sorry. McDonald's, we do sometimes.
Well, what we can consume is your wisdom and experience in coaching. See how I did there? I got us out of McDonald's. For people listening to this who want to coach, it's a masterclass talking to you. I've really enjoyed this, and I can't wait to listen back because there's so many threads. You get asked that a lot, though. But some advice to help people to be a better coach. Where does that start? And that could be coaching in sport, at work. It could be coaching their kids.
Yeah, it is. And really it's to reach out and get support for themselves. Like I talk to a lot of community coaches, and most of the time it's just they just need a little bit of confidence about what they're doing. And don't hesitate to have like the coaching director or whoever's the head coach come and coach with you, or go and watch them coach, so that you go, oh, that's how you do that. And I do that already. That's great. And then do your coaching courses. Sometimes they're a bit boring and all those things, but at the end of the day, they've got information in them that's meant to support you. So I always tell my netball coaches, even the players who are playing, to be doing their coaching qualifications while they're playing, because that could help them when they finish. And a lot of them have gone on with coaching, but a lot of them have used it in their business lives as well, in their other careers. So that'd be a big one for me.
And some of the messages I've taken out, what you've said today, if I can put together 3 or 4 key takeouts. Get outside your own environment. Go to different sports, or for this example, go to different businesses or industries. Look at best practice.
Yeah, can I just say there too, you don't have to go on a big overseas trip. This also annoys me about some Australian sporting teams. They could actually go and watch the Diamonds train in Canberra, and it's a lot cheaper. Or go and watch the wheelchair rugby guys train. There's so much already happening in Australia. We don't always have to go overseas.
Valid point.
Yeah.
So get out of your own backyard and go and look at other sports and best practice and diverse sports as well.
Yeah. Diverse.
I know Mike Cron, who is the scrum doctor, Kiwi legend, was with the All Blacks for 20 plus years. Mike has done a lot of work with netball and actually learnt peripheral vision from a New Zealand netball coach, and he openly talks about that.
I can tell you that the AFL coaches here do not do enough work in netball.
AFL coaches listening to this, you know who to contact. Go see Lise. So getting outside of your own backyard is a big one. There's a hunger and you hide it, but it's an insatiable thirst for growing, improving, competing.
Yeah. I'm addicted to it.
I can tell. But there's also a blend, and I don't know whether you always had this or whether it's come more as you've got experience, but there's also a sense of, I can sit in it, and you said a few times, thank you. You haven't fobbed me off straight away, but it's also that, well, coaching psychology, we call it lag time, where there's a lag between what you've done and achieved and how other people see you, and actually catching up with that yourself. And even that process today of the books you're doing, it's the lag time and the learning and reflecting. Anything else? So there's curiosity, there's learn from great people around you.
Look, as we had the interruption before, family first is very important, and being fair dinkum about that as a leader. I think that's something that we have to be mindful of. Even high-performance athletes need to have family time, and you need to know when that's appropriate and when it's not. And it doesn't matter which culture you're from, you need to be aware of that. So learn about the cultures and backgrounds of all your players. Frank Panisi and Craig, they have the different cultures present, as you saw on the documentary. They've been doing that for a long time, because they know the more we know about each other, the better we can, use the great strengths of that within our whole, it's like when we started our high performance Indigenous camp back in 2017, the first one. Like now we've got a First Nations team. It just needs a little pebble in the pond.
And that example with Craig Bellamy and Frank Panisi at Melbourne Storm, there's absolute reasons why they continue to perform at a high level and make the grand finals. I'll add one other one as well. There's a playfulness and there's a fun around this too, isn't it? Like you light up as I say that. A few times today we've danced between serious and talking about concepts and learning, and then break into smile.
I've been lucky to earn what I earned in coaching, which I never had before, and do the thing that I'm absolutely love. How can you not be joyous about that?
And what you love as well is taking all that knowledge from years and decades of experience into the corporate world. And I know you're doing keynotes, your name pops up on cards, you're doing consulting and workshops. Just give us an example of something you're working on. And what I would love, one of my goals, I said this before we went live, I want people listening to this to not book Shiny Head, me. I want them to book you, because there's so much value, and I don't know whether a lot of people actually realise you're doing a lot of corporate work now. So back to what are some of the concepts you're working on? What are you loving in the corporate world?
I'm loving doing work with high performance teams and helping them to do their work better, really, more efficiently, more effectively, more holistically. I do a lot of work on holistic coaching. So I call it the biopsychosocial coach. And I know Dan Abrahams, who we both follow from England, he sort of got me down that track.
Biopsychosocial, Dan Abrahams.
Biopsychosocial coaching.
Which was invented in 1974.
Yeah. Yeah, and really old school's good school sometimes, and history. So I do a lot of that work with different teams. So I can tailor what I've done to so many different industries. I've worked with, construction managers, and I've worked with the waste management people at Whitehorse Council. They were terrific to work with, getting better at their teamwork. I can assume I can work with miners. I used to be married to one. I can definitely do work in sport, but, I'm happy to challenge people. I love working in science as well. I've had Michelle Simmons come and speak to the Diamonds because I wanted them to know about quantum mechanics and quantum computing and what she was doing in, the University of New South Wales. I love science. So I can work with IT people because I'm a maths person. I kind of get them a little bit, but I'm not completely down that track. So, but it doesn't mean I can't work with them.
And you know what? One of the best reframe. Do you know the best strategy to get more people to book you?
What's that? Have a website?
No, the website comes having a book or books.
Oh, that's right. Yes, and I'll need to write that book. It will be out in 12 months' time.
Is it a book or books? Because even when you started saying before, and I didn't want to interrupt.
Look, there's probably two. There'll definitely be a leadership one, and it'll be about my personal story, but it won't be for women, just women. It will be for everybody. I'm a humanist at the end of the day. I'm a feminist, of course, but I teach people. And that's why I thought I could coach an AFL team, there's all sorts of stories about that. So, yeah, just that one, and maybe a netball story. Maybe that might be a fiction story, I reckon.
So there you have it. We've got 12 months. Gee, we've come a long way. Remember that first conversation we had, and we sent some messages after, and you were thinking and reflecting. I can't wait to read that book, and I'm in the middle of one as well. There's nothing like a timeline, Lisa, to make you work towards. And it's a labour of love.
You definitely helped me with that. So thank you very much.
Well, it's a great story. And I think sometimes we do get a bit stuck in what we're doing and think, I don't know whether I can write a book or do I have enough relevance for the corporate world, yada, yada, yada. Your story, as I mentioned at the start today, one of the greatest Australian coaches, we've got to get it out there. But it's not like that's the end product. Yes, 10 years of dominance, 81% winning ratio. But what I've really enjoyed as I've got to know you and people that know you, it's the process behind. We hear a lot about this in elite sport now. The outcomes are achieved by real clarity on the process. I think there's a real methodology you have that you make it simple, but I know it's a lot more complex. What are the processes we need to follow to be better leaders? What are the processes we need to follow to be better versions of ourselves? What are the processes we need to follow to connect as a team? And when you get that beautiful tapestry of all that, great things happen.
I agree.
For people who want to book you, for people who would like you to coach them or their leadership teams, where do we find you?
I'm still managed by TGI, sports management company here in Victoria. So they can reach out to TGI. And I'm also on Celebrity Speakers, I'm pretty sure, and a couple of the other Saxton speakers. So they can reach out that way.
We'll put all of your contact details on the show notes as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You've got stuff to get onto, busy life, work and personal. So I really appreciate the time today.
Thank you.